Today we'll be discussing boundaries towards success. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us. And please note also that this session will be recorded and it will be on social media and online available. So if you have any objections to that, please let me know directly. It's michelle@mulac.co.za. You'll find my details in the chat box as well. So without further ado, I need to introduce our hosts today. So this is Willie and Alta. As you know, Willie and Alta are both professional coaches, certified financial planners as well with this series. So we do invite you to join the next ones as well. And yeah, we'd like to ask Willie and Alta if they can tell us a little bit more about themselves and why they are coaching the public and why they are doing these sessions specifically. So thank you. Over to Willie.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Michelle, and thank you for again helping us to host our webinars. I'm just in short, I retired from corporate life 6 years ago from a stressful life, I would say. Very much involved with business development and marketing management, and yes, with one foot in finance as well. And currently, I'm a partner at Change Partners Coaching, doing executive coaching. I also have my own company, which is Master Coaching, where I do counseling and training, financial stuff. And my passion is relationship coaching. Why I coach is I think I had some relationship challenges in my life, and also financial challenges. And I made a couple of mistakes. But I'm 66, and I'm in a phase of my life where I say, well, I can share a lot of my, let's say, mistakes, if one can call it that. And I also want to leave a legacy. I mean, I don't want to retire at all. I love what I do. And I hope I can share a lot of my life with people and learnings. Myself and Alta, she can also maybe, if she wanted to mention it, we share the same passion in terms of coaching, and we are both certified financial planners, and we are both NLP coaches, and also we love the enneagram as a coaching tool. So that's me in short. Alta, yours.
Yeah, thanks, Willie, for the opportunity, and thanks for Michelle for helping us again tonight, and for everybody else that's attending tonight. A warm welcome. Thanks for your time. Yeah, my passion, Willie, we share the same passion, and that is really to help clients. And what I've realized over the years is sometimes finance has got nothing to do with the numbers. It's all to do with the emotions, and when can people actually move forward, and you know, who's controlling who, and who's, you know, managing who, you know, in relationships specifically. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight, because I think for myself and Willie, for yourself as well, sometimes we see clients too late and then the damage is done, and then it's typical cases where people could not put a boundary in place. So that's really my passion, is relationships and finances, because we see a lot of divorces, and most of the time it's sometimes money and relationships. So yeah, same passion. Sometimes feel that you're losing yourself, you know, you lose your identity in some way, you know, you don't feel in control of your own life, you get emotional, or you get angry, stressed out about small situations. And if you start losing yourself or your own identity, you know, then we need to ask boundary questions. Sometimes live for the approval of other people. We fear rejection, we fear abandonment. And then we try and get our happiness on the outside, where happiness is really an inside job. In our relationships, and it's not only in marriage, or, you know, it's in work, it's in friends, it's in family. We sometimes have our biggest challenges in our relationships, and that's where we need to grow, we need to heal. But sometimes we can lose ourselves if we become people's pleasers, And maybe we must ask the audience, what do they see as boundaries? And maybe they can give us examples where they had to put in boundaries. Or Willie, maybe you can give us an example of your own boundaries and why do you think boundaries is also important?
If I can recall, many moons ago, when I was married, we were pretty much financially okay. But I think I regarded my ex-wife's money as my own. She had a lot of, not a lot, but more money than me, and I just regarded it as also my money. So that's one thing that I sort of overcrossed certain boundaries, which definitely played a role in my divorce.
Yes, so what I was thinking about is I had similar situations where I would lend money to friends or family and so on, and you do in some way expect it back, but in most cases you never get it back. And especially with friends, you know, they do sort of feel, because we are friends and so on, I don't need to pay you back. And one of the quotes, and I'd like to hear your comments on that, is one of the quotes I've seen on social media is that if a friend doesn't pay you back, it was, you know, the friendship was worth that amount of money, and so on. So in my case, it's very sad to lose friends because of that, but that is mostly the result of not having that boundary, not being able to say, no, I cannot help you. You do lose those friendships.
If we would ask the question, you know, why is boundary so important? You know, I would say otherwise people will just walk over you. If you think of a building, I mean, if you go to a building and there's a sign, you know, don't trespass, there's the line, don't go over. But now when it comes to our own boundaries as people, we don't see that sign specifically, but we see this other signs, and then we don't, you know, deal with that signs appropriately, especially in my case many years ago. So, can draw the correct lines, I would say, then you will be more happy as a person, you will be more healthy, you will improve the quality of your life, you will feel less lost, I would say. You will feel more who you really are, and absolutely more physical and emotionally more well. You know?
My question is then, what is worth more? Helping your friend out because you don't want to lose the relationship, or not helping them out because you don't want to deal with the consequences later? What is more important, and how do you deal with that? Because for me, my friends are very, you know, important to me, and I would give them money if that would mean I could keep the relationship. Is that right?
That is an excellent
how do we
question.
deal with that?
No, that is excellent questions. We are going to deal with that specific example, in fact, a bit later in the seminar, but just as a quick answer, you know, I would say if you're assertive enough and people know you and they know where are your boundaries. I mean, for example, in my own case, if I really had the money and I wanted to help them for reasons, and I had good reasons to do it, it's fine to do that. But I didn't have the money. It was, first of all, not my money, and secondly, I went into credit card debt to help people to pay for 2 payments on luxury cars, you know. Yeah, so it's circumstantial as well, but we are going to deal with this very good example later in exactly what you asked. Thank you for that. Good question.
Okay, before we do the quiz, I want you to quickly read through the first one and tell me what is the feeling that you feel, and where can you see yourself maybe or somebody else. If I say trauma teaches you to close your heart and armor up, and healing teaches you to open your heart, but boundary up. Because this is really, we all experience trauma. If we want to say we haven't experienced trauma, we all have our own trauma. Some of us, some people in the world, Elmarie, I saw you said givers and takers, and it's the givers and the takers. Givers wants to get that approval, and the takers is almost like the bullies. You know, I always say to people, for some it's a power game. They want to feel strong. They want to be in control. And it all comes from childhood. But if we go through the healing process, we can open our hearts and we can boundary up, and then we can have solid relationships where sometimes we close our hearts and we armor up. And that is where the biggest mistakes happen in relationships, specifically in friends, family, if we armor up. But I think it's very powerful. For me personally, I've seen a lot of people that armor up, and you know, they don't want to open up, they don't want to share, and that's one of the things that you need to open up to be able to heal if you admit, because then the authentic self comes up and you don't operate in the ego from your hurt, from the hurt of the past, and we all got baggage. And the next quote that I want to just share, and that's really reality, is that our subconscious is our reality. It's not who we truly are. It's the subconscious that was programmed into us by society, by our parents. And at one stage in your life, you're going to get to a point where you say, I don't like this reality. I want to break this pattern. But very few people understand the subconscious mind. And I think it's really, really powerful if you know your own reality and you can manage your own reality, not to trip over your lessons you need to learn in life over and over again. I think we all got those lessons, and that's reality lessons. So the next thing that I want to just quickly discuss is a quiz, and I want to just ask you to ask yourself, and remember, we all got this. I'll be honest with you, sometimes I'm in certain relationships, I'm a little bit of a people's pleaser, and some relationships I'm not a people's pleaser. I can put clear boundaries, and but we all got our relationships that we sometimes feel that we're a little bit boundaryless, and others where the boundaries is too strong. So what I want to ask you to just reflect on for the moment, because that's what we really will focus on for tonight, is, do you sometimes put the needs and wants of others before your own needs? And think of maybe situations where you do this. And I know we all do that, but do we do it for the approval to get the approval of another person, and then later we've got that resentment, and we almost become angry later that I've put my own needs on the back burner and put other people's needs, you know, on top. Because the more we put our own needs on the back burner, we will lose our sense of self all the time. So ask yourself that first question. Okay, poor boundaries, zero boundary. Thanks, Paul, for sharing. Then I agree with others to avoid conflict. I think a lot of us can maybe tick that tick box, maybe not all. But when do you sometimes agree with others just to avoid conflict, where you're too scared to say what you think? And this has got an impact on finances, and that's why, and your relationships. Elmarie is saying never.
No, I've learned to, and the thing is, I'm not an aggressive person, but there's no ways I'm going to sell myself. If I don't agree with you, I sometimes start a conversation by saying, this is not going to be easy for you or for me, but this is the way I feel. But then you do get people who become aggressive. And then I just immediately say, that's not my mode of conversation. I'm stepping out of this. But if it's a mature person that we can sort of discuss things with, yeah, but I'm never going to sell myself. Definitely not.
Right, right. And Elmarie, I think what you're actually also saying is that sometimes we have to have difficult conversations, and conflict as conflict, but it's really not conflict. It's just we differ in perception, or we differ in opinion, and we both are allowed to share our opinion. But
Absolutely.
We do.
Within the first 30 seconds, you can determine whether that person is mature enough to have this conversation with or not.
No, totally agree. Totally agree. Yeah. So it's all about maturity, and how well do they know themselves, and if they're mature enough. Then the next one is I can express my true feelings as negative or positive. And that's what we actually discussed now. I find myself unable to say no to things. I see it so many times. And I help a lot of people putting in boundaries, especially on finances. And I'm going to use an example. The other day, last week, they use a 12-year-old girl to phone specific people to request money because the father is not paying maintenance. So now they're asking the grandmother and the sister-in-law, and it was so sad for me because I said, you know what they're actually teaching the child is how to be a beggar. So I said, no, we have to put boundaries in place here. So that's a typical example. I mean, where a 12-year-old is phoning the grandmother to say, I need this money, for this and this. And it's all because the father is not paying the maintenance. So that's a typical one. Then the next one is, I'm not afraid to disappoint, from Michelle. Yeah, it's also manipulation. Because remember, if you're not authentic and you cannot say what you want, we all got needs. You're just going to manipulate people into what you need and what you want. And that's manipulation is cruel. So it's very sad, but sometimes we need to help people to set those boundaries, because sometimes it's very difficult for them. They don't realize that this person is actually overstepping a boundary, and you have to put a boundary in place. Some people do not recognize that, that's all. Then I'm able to make my own decisions. And I think that's very important, is that, sometimes we get people, they never make decisions for themselves. It's always somebody else that's making decisions for them. And I've seen it a lot with females that I've worked with. And then, unfortunately, it's too late. The decisions on the finances was made only by the husband in those examples. And they were never allowed to make their own decisions. And then it's too late. They lost all the money, whatever. Then I allow others to speak for me. I think we all got a sense of responsibility. So maybe this does not resonate with you, but for some of you, it can. And it's not in all your relationships, but maybe a child, think about a child, a parent. I'm comfortable expressing my emotions. I want to ask all the males in the group, Willie, I know you are very comfortable expressing your emotions, but for the other males, they were not taught to express their emotions. And I think sometimes that's a big problem that they're facing, is to really express their emotions. Willie, do you want to say anything on that?
I saw Paul made a comment there in the chat. How to express feelings is the key. There are ways to do it without creating conflict. That is quite a good statement, Paul. And yeah, sometimes men do have troubles in expressing that, but it can be learned. I think that the key is also to know that there's value in vulnerability. Sometimes people, certain types of, well, also personality types, but I'm generalizing now. Sometimes people doesn't want to show vulnerability, but if we change, we don't actually become something different. If we change, you become more who you really are. And the more you become more who you really are, then it's easier to show vulnerability, that you cannot be always right, and you can make mistakes, and you can actually show your feelings, and if needed, cry if you have to.
Okay, then I find myself doing more in relationships. I'll end a relationship rather than allow others to hurt me. And I respect other people's feelings, needs, and preferences.
No, absolutely. I think what we can discuss now is typical boundaries in life, because I mean, if we talk about boundaries, exactly, what do we mean by that? What are the typical boundaries? And I think you can already, from the discussion, have it. It's the line you draw. It's in a way the line. Where do I start? Where do you start? Where are the lines? And I think I would say unhealthy boundaries in a big way is it's like leaving the door open of your own house. If you think of your house, if you just leave the door open at night, you will not do that. And basically also you cannot be too rigid at all. You cannot just have a fortress that nobody can come in either. So it is a balancing act. But typical boundaries that we have is physical boundaries. I mean, also in terms of your personal space. Sometimes people will come and stand with you, but very close to you, and it's in your space. Then you will sort of retreat a bit. But then that is where also maturity comes in, or emotional intelligence, where you can actually see that and respond appropriately to that. So sometimes people, they're not really so sure of themselves. They don't know themselves so well. And the thing with emotional intelligence is the more you know yourself, the easier it is to know other people. The more you can manage yourself in terms of your emotions or thinking patterns, the easier it is to see it in other people. So that is in terms of the physical part. And then of course, so we can talk about the emotional boundaries and intellectual boundaries and financial boundaries, which Alta will take now further. Time boundaries, value boundaries is a very important one. Religious boundaries, energy boundaries, all those boundaries. If I can maybe take an example of values, if you're in a marriage or in a partnership, and the one partner A really values time a lot, and partner B is more laissez-faire, time is important, that's a clash of values. That is now who is now trampling on each other values, who is now disregarding each other boundaries. So that is an important one. Or take another one. Person A's value is maybe fun, to have fun in life. Is a very high value for a certain individual. And to work like a workaholic and not a lot of fun is maybe a higher value for another person. So that's a clash of values. So it's also then become a boundary issue. I think what we want to do with tonight's workshop is to focus more on financial boundaries, and to also then go over to relationship boundaries, which is really my passion.
There's sometimes a values clash, and you know, it's like you said, if you more of a social creature, you want to go out, you know, go to social events and go and eat out, you know, much more than your spouse or, you know, your partner or whatever you mentioned now. And sometimes that's got an impact on the finances. So you have to, in some way, commit. And we'll talk obviously about financial boundaries. But what I've seen is a values clash is because now you need that social interaction, but the other person doesn't really need that. How do we meet each other halfway? I think that's where one person, especially, you know, in marriages or in friendships or in business, you know, how do we collaborate so that both of the parties, when we set financial boundaries, according to values, is honored in the relationship. And I think that's important because we can put it across business, across friendships, everything is, you know, really the values issue. And what I've also realized with clients that I've been helping over the years, you know, if they have no boundaries whatsoever, it just takes that one big financial lesson that they need to learn, going through debt or where they realize they've got nothing left. And then there's serious boundaries. And I can give you serious boundaries. That's like, you know, 10 years ago, they had every night they went for pizzas or, you know, coffees. And now they go once a month, you know. So it's that one lesson that changes the boundaries of the couple, of the individual. Their whole life is turned around. And it's just that one lesson. But if we know it up front, we don't need to go through the painful lessons. That's what I want to say.
What are financial boundaries and why are they important? So yeah, let's get to this part.
Yeah, Willie, yeah, okay. We started off by saying, you know, what is financial boundaries and why are they important? But I think it's like you said, it's we need to set limits for ourselves. First of all, we need to set limits for ourselves, but also limits towards our friends and family. Michelle, you asked that question, you know, when do you need to help your friend, you know, and you want to sometimes help friends. But I think it's also, you know, what you were taught as a small child, what is the family and the society where you're operating in. I've worked with families where there's no boundaries, everybody's helping everybody, you know, everybody's taking responsibility for everybody. And then I've worked with families where everybody is for themselves, they're very responsible, but if there's a need, they will help. And I think what is more important is that you cannot achieve financial success or achieve any of your financial goals if you do not set financial boundaries. That you need to set a boundary for yourself to say, I want to pay off my house. But the first boundary that you need to set yourself is, do you have a budget? And that's the question. Willie, and I think we've had a discussion on this on numerous occasions, is if you consult with clients, they don't have a budget, they don't have boundaries. If you don't have a budget, you don't have boundaries. And it sounds very funny now to say people do not have a budget, but I've seen it. People do not have financial goals. There's no budget in place, and in the end, you can expect financial disaster or a wake-up call for anybody that's working without a budget. Budget is financial goals. In order to get to your financial goals, you need to set, first of all, boundaries for yourself. Now, a boundary for yourself is the hardest thing to do. For me, it's very easy. For my personality type, it's very easy. But for other personality types, it's very difficult. It feels like, I can remember I consulted with one client for many years. And for them, it was almost like if you give them a budget, you're cutting off their wings. You know, you don't want to restrain them. It feels like you're taking their freedom away if you set a budget and you do a budget example with them. But how can you achieve any financial goal if you cannot set financial boundaries for yourself? And if I talk about financial boundaries for yourself, it means also financial boundaries that you put together with a spouse, with a business partner, with a friend, whatever. You have to put those boundaries in place. The moment you put boundaries in place, it takes out the emotion. It takes out the compulsive spending, the overspending, the no commitment, and eventually, if you put those boundaries in place, you will get to financial success. A lot of people don't understand that the biggest boundary that you can set for yourself is your own boundaries.
What I'm saying is that by setting the boundaries, does that mean how much I can spend, what I should spend money on, and how much anyone else can spend? Let's say, for instance, our kids, how much can they spend, how much I have available for them, and so forth. Can you elaborate on that?
100%, Michelle, thanks for that question. If you do not set financial boundaries, a budget is a financial boundary. It's telling you clear guidelines on our priorities and our goals to say, listen, we want to pay off debt, or we want to buy a house and we want to pay off the house. So that is your priorities. And according to your financial goals, if you want to pay off the house or the car, or you want to educate your kids on finances, you have to help them to work with a small little budget, that they know where's their boundaries.
Hello, sorry, my battery died, but I see I'm back now.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
okay.
So I actually had a question, or I had a comment that sometimes you do put boundaries in place, that is basically your budget, but the problem is committing and making sure that you stick to it. that's really what sometimes is a big challenge.
Thanks, Isanda, for that challenge, because I think what is important, once you've set a boundary, a budget, it's all about the communication. So how do you communicate it with your loved ones? And I think it's important that the more we educate other people of what is our boundaries. Let's say I say my boundary, and I'm using now boundary, but I don't need to call it a boundary. I can just say to people, you know what, my goal is to pay off the house and we plan for a holiday, you know, in December. Sorry, I can't make this commitment. You know, I've got my priorities, because that is my priorities. That's my commitments for my financial goals. And that's my financial boundaries that I've set for myself. But then it's important to also communicate it to, you know, the family. And that's very important for parents, also for their kids. I want to use that same example where Willie said he's paying off, you know, the car payment. You see a lot where a parent is paying a home payment here for a child, you know, or a car payment, and it's on a continuous basis. So what do we, the message that we give is, you don't need to take responsibility. I'll be there to rescue you all the time. So we become an enabler. And who can we be cross with? It's only ourselves. All that we need to say is, sorry, I can't help you this month. Or if it's your child, listen, I can help you this month, but if you cannot continue, then you have to look at an alternative. You know, buy a cheaper car that you can afford. You know, do an alternative, you know, planning, because then you have to reshuffle. But I think what is important is what Willie mentioned. If I continue on paying the home loan payment for my child, at the end of the day, I must be happy to go and live with my child one day, because I didn't commit to my own home payment. I didn't commit to my own retirement planning. So are you comfortable to go and beg your child to go and live with your child? If not, then it's better to say to your child, listen, I need to pay off my home. It's important. I can help you for this month, but it cannot be on a continuous basis, because this is my commitments. I don't want to end up, if I help you all the time, I won't be able to make my financial commitments of paying off my home. And I don't want to come and live with you one day. So, and that's typically how we communicate boundaries. I know it can be challenging for people, but I think it's crucial for our own well-being. And if I say well-being, it's your emotional health, your mental health. You're going to have sleepless nights and have financial anxiety if you don't put in boundaries. And, you know, your own commitments at the end of the day, you don't want to end up at the end of the day, you know, helped everybody around you, but you sitting, you know, with no money at all. So it's to commit to yourself. And that is the biggest financial boundary that you need to put in place. And once you start doing just one, you will communicate it to the people in the house. And Sisanda, I think the best answer that I can give you is how to communicate. And if people is going off track, is do it together, plan together, commit together, because that is how we work in partnerships. Get the commitment from everybody that this is what we're going to commit to for the next year, 5 years, 3 years, 10 years, and then review your plan every month, every year. How am I on track? Am I making progress? Where did we go off track? Okay, we had an emergency here. Fine, but we need to change and shuffle, you know, some of the finances again.
If you say yes to one thing, you say no to something else. And if you say no to one thing, you say yes to something else. There's only, if you think of a budget, there's only so much money in the pot. And if you go over budget with one item, it's okay. I mean, there could be good reasons for it. But then that over budgeting there, overtake must be, then there's something else that you have to spend less on. And of course, we live in a not so perfect world. But as long as you've got like a spreadsheet at least, Alta, I think that's the whole thing. One can have a 12 months or a 3-year spreadsheet actually, it just makes your life easier that you can see what are the trends. Are you going down or going up? Are you increasing your value or are you decreasing your value?
And it's really, if you look at what you've earned over your career from the day you started to work, you'll quickly see what is the emotions that created the leaks in your financial situation. And that is the healing that really needs to happen, because we think we're going to get happiness on the outside by, getting more and more of the things. And sometimes it's not giving us the happiness. It's actually making us very unhappy at some stage. So I just want to ask, the audience, if you've got financial goals, I mean, you have to put in money goals and boundaries. And it can be as simple as to pay off your house, to prepare for long-term care, pay off your debt. Otherwise, if you don't have those goals and you don't put boundaries in order to achieve those goals, you will never experience financial success. Financial success comes with responsibility and commitment. And if you don't commit to yourself, somewhere along the line, it's going to impact on your mental and emotional well-being. And you're going to have sleepless nights with financial anxiety. And you can only, there's one person you can blame in that situation, it's only yourself. So another boundary, and what I wanted to use as a boundary, I've worked with clients that's, where I helped them with a budget, and I think for 10 years, they could not manage a budget. And after all, they ended up actually after 10 years with no increase in their net worth, achieving no financial goals that they set for themselves, because they were living, day by day, doing emotional, with no restrictions, freedom, let's call it freedom for money. And then what happened was, the moment you learn that lesson, from, as I said, from eating out every night, and now it's once a month, they're going and eating out. So, and it's just taking, the awareness. And what I'm trying to say is sometimes our subconscious mind is driving our habits and our behaviors. And we need to understand that, because that's creating our reality. And we sometimes get people when they're in 60 or 70, then they realize, listen, but I lived according to my reality, my subconscious mind, my habits was actually not helping me, but hurting me. I always do my budget. However, there would be a day where I would have a bad day, and then you start spending. Okay. Kenny, that's exactly what happens is, you need on those days where you go overboard in spending, ask yourself, it's really necessary, and what are you trying to avoid? And this is going to sound very funny now, but spending is like not exercising, drinking alcohol when you want to stop drinking alcohol. Spending is like an alcoholic. It sounds now very funny if I call it this way, but it's, how do an alcoholic stop? They need to go inside and say, what am I trying to avoid? It's the same with spending. If you stress out a lot and you go and you spend a lot of money, it's emotional comfort. That's it. You're trying to avoid something. You're trying to avoid the pain. And the only thing that you can do is go inside and ask yourself, instead of going spending to feel better, go inside and ask yourself, what am I trying to avoid? What is the pain we are trying to numb? Yes, exactly, Michelle. And it's things that sometimes gave us comfort as a child, or that we created comfort for ourselves through the years. And then we will go and overspend. If you just listen to, some of the very rich people out there, they don't drive those extremely fancy cars because they know it costs them a lot of money. And they save rather than doing the emotional overspending. So it comes from a void. And you must ask yourself, and I'm not saying you're not allowed to spend on a nice car. You are allowed, but save for the things that's going to last longer than doing the emotional spending all the time. Because somewhere you're trying to avoid something deep inside, and that's what you need to work on. Because money is, we make all our decisions on emotions. It's like you said, I mean, you can have a budget and you don't keep with your budget. Everything is emotional. We make all our decisions with money, with the emotional brain, and we're trying to avoid things. And that's when we make our mistakes.
So I see Michelle asked there, what is the pain that we want to numb?
Yeah, Michelle, that is the question you need to ask yourself, is what are you trying to avoid by doing the overspending? And it differs for different people. We all got a different escape, way of escaping.
Yeah, if I can comment on that, that is one of the things I've learned is that my weakness is shoes. I love pretty shoes. So I used to, before, a while ago and so on the bad days, as Sisanka was saying, on the really bad days, I would go to the mall and buy 3 pairs of shoes at 1,000 Rand each, because that makes me happy. I'll go home and I'll be happy for 2 weeks, and then something bad would happen again and I'll just go back and buy some more shoes and I'll be okay again. Yeah, that the sort of keeps you, how can I say, unaware of what the problem is, but you're at the surface happy because you've got nice, pretty shoes, you know? So, and that I think is a level that a lot of people is still on.
100%, Michelle. Yeah, and you need to actually set for yourself, listen, I'm allowed to buy 1 pair of shoes, you know, every month or whatever, you know, and that's what you need to do, is set that boundary, because then it will, then you know. I mean, I've done a lot of other courses with other coaches that's really going deep, deep, deep with the money story and the healing of that. And they say you actually need to go into a shop. And if you're a compulsive spender, you need to actually just walk in the shop and tame your emotions and look at the things and go back and see what happens, because nothing will change, nothing will happen. But it's just, you know, taming yourself and going deep inside and saying, what am I trying to avoid? Because people ruin their finances by not being able to tame those emotions. So just some tips from my side is that I think that's the most important part, is to establish your own boundaries. Because once you establish your own boundaries, you cannot tell people what they need to do with their money if you're not an example for them. So if I set my own boundaries and I communicate my own boundaries and what is important for me, people will have respect for you. They will see that you're financially successful because you honor your commitments, you take responsibility, and you're not emotional. So that roller coaster, you're not one day buying this and the next day you don't have money, and the next day when you get money, you know, all the money is gone again. I mean, we don't want to live that way. We want to live with a sense of responsibility, and on a conscious level, we want to make financial decisions. And if I say a conscious level, making financial decisions from a level of consciousness is to say exactly what is my emotional behaviors that I'm trying to avoid, that's trapping me in setting financial boundaries for myself. Why can I not set boundaries for myself? How do I value, what do I value in life? And Michelle, for example, it's shoes. For me, it's extra, you know, educational courses. But you have to set your boundaries, and I've set boundaries for myself, and you know, it's important to commit to that. So some of the tips that I can give you is maybe tonight or tomorrow, when you reflect on tonight's session, is say to yourself, what is the goals that you want to achieve in the next 3 months? Is it to come out of debt? Is it just to reduce your compulsive spending? And then to set a budget for yourself and create financial boundaries for yourself. And once you start creating those boundaries for yourself, you will see that it automatically will start communicating it with other people, because it's important for you that you pay off your house. And then you communicate it with the family members, whoever, you know, is part of the household. And the moment you do it, they will start doing it as well. And it's actually a way of honoring your commitments. And people will have much more respect for you, because you're not one day, you know, we all know those emotions where people is one day they're up, the next day they're down, the next day they're up, the next day they're down, because they've got no control. And the more control you've got, the more successful you will be.
The one thing that's important, I'm going, after the break, we're going over to relationship barriers, and that is boundaries. That is so important, because you cannot divorce finance from relationships. Because in financial decisions, it has, then that thing comes out of fear of rejection, or fear of the confrontation maybe. And that is why that's why we talked about it together. I think one thing that I also now realize whilst Alta was talking is that most of us hasn't been taught good financial boundaries. You know, we haven't been taught it, you know, and also not relationship boundaries. We haven't been taught it. I think if we talk about relationships, what I want to do is also, as Alta's situation, to talk a bit about you know, some tips and what it is and why it's important and that. And then I want to specifically come to the point of being assertive enough, which is something that we have to learn. If I first, you know, would say, you know, why is it important? You know, like the boundaries of relationships. I think one thing that comes to mind is the practice of self-care. And we forget that, because if you're constantly infringing on your own personal boundaries, the lines that you draw for yourself in all these things, and you're also intruding on the boundaries of your partner specifically, I mean, it leads to resentment for yourself, it leads to conflict, and it's just not worthwhile. And if we can learn again, you know, because we haven't been taught it, if we can learn again to set you know, more, you know, healthy boundaries, then we have time for yourself again. You know, you can then communicate the needs that you have in a relationship. And I see that a lot, is that people don't communicate their needs in a relationship. And money plays a big role. And I need to just share this one example of a young couple at the airport many years ago. I overheard their fight. They thought they were alone, but they weren't. And the wife, young married couple, I could hear, you know, she struggled with the baby and the washing, and they didn't have a washing machine to wash the nappies. And she was fighting with him because he bought a bicycle. And they didn't discuss that properly. And she was telling him how it's difficult to wash with the hands, you know, the nappies, etc. That was such an example of not taking each other into account. It's then the balancing of space that we give each other. So I think that is why it's so important to get our boundaries right, our relationship boundaries. Another thing to add, you know, is that we shouldn't allow a mood to dictate the relationship. And you should also not allow your partner's mood to dictate your happiness and your well-being. So, and it will also not make sense if you sacrifice your plans, your dreams, your goals, in order just to please everybody. It's just not the win-win. And one thing that I realize is that if we don't get this right in terms of our relationships, it's difficult to get it right with the finance as well. So we need to learn to develop correct assertivity, which I will explain in a while. You see, the reason why we don't set these boundaries, also Alta alluded to that, is the fact that we have this fear of rejection. We have fear of confrontation. We feel guilty about certain things as well, and we have sometimes safety concerns. And important, we were not taught healthy boundaries.
Yes, so there's this joke about the husband that thinks he's, doing the wife, obviously, a great service by buying her a new Kenwood chef or a new vacuum cleaner and so forth. In the meantime, she needs more assistance with the kids or whatever else. So he's spending money on stuff that's not necessary, but he is trying to help her. How do you deal with that? Because I do think that that has to do with boundaries as well, where she needs to explain exactly what it is she needs instead of what it is he wants to give her. Do I understand you correctly?
Yeah, Michelle, I think if I can, I know I'm guilty. I'll tell you what I'm guilty of. I love books. I love reading. I love knowledge. So if there's a birthday for anybody else, I always buy them a nice book, what I really think can have an impact on their lives, because that's my gift. I want to give them something. But remember, I give from what I want and what I think they need. But maybe they don't like books. So I've made a couple of mistakes where books just end up, and a year later I ask them, listen, did you read that book? And they say, no, I haven't had time. And so sometimes what we do is we buy things for other people, what we want, remember, because we're living from our perspective and our opinion. Instead of valuing the other person, what do they value? And we all make that mistake. I think you can ask anybody, yeah, they will say, listen, what we love, we buy other people, instead of finding out really what they want. And that is also a way of respecting and really showing them that you know them, that you care for them and what they want. Michelle, I know I don't know if it's a hint for a new bread or a more bake from the husband, I'm not sure. But anyway, I won't fall for that one. I won't be impressed with that.
Yeah, surely. If someone buys me a vacuum cleaner, it's not necessarily what I would expect, Obviously, I would rather have, a nice evening out or whatever else instead of a vacuum cleaner, to say, go work or whatever. But I also think it speaks to our needs more than our wants, where our partners we should communicate for them to know what we need, not really what they think we want. Is that, if that makes sense?
It
So
makes
I would, yeah.
If I can maybe put something nice on the slide, this. Maybe this will also help. And I want to read it not too quickly either. An intimate relationship is one in which neither party silences, sacrifices, or betrays the self, and each party expresses strength and vulnerability, weakness and competence in a balanced way. So I think part of the answer is that balancing act. Because in relationships, you have your partner, and some personalities are more stronger than others. And you would say, for example, how would you deal with it? And some of the tips I want to share is maybe a bit of the how to do it. Because we feel uncomfortable, we don't want a confrontation. And I think one way to deal with that is of course if you know your boundaries and you feel more firm into it, is how do you say it? It's the way you say things. It is if there's something that you're not comfortable with, you just state it as a fact. You say, I'm not comfortable with this. It's not that you don't say anything, and just allow a person to make a decision on your behalf. It is you say it clearly, not in an aggressive way. And we will talk a bit later the difference between aggressive and assertiveness. It's just to state the fact, but like I would say non-emotional, I would say. But if there is an emotion involved, it's empathy. And also to say a no is not say no, it's like you can say this does not work for me. Then the person knows. Or not at this time, or I've decided not to. So there's various ways. So please feel other ways of putting it in the chat box, and you can learn from each other. So the what to do is it's also part of using confident language. I mean, your body language must be confident. Because if you really know what you want, if you know what is your boundaries, it's easier to be confident. But if you're not really sure what you really want in a relationship or with finance, you will not be confident. That is the risk. So you have to understand, that is why it starts, that's what Alta said earlier, it starts with yourself first. It starts with yourself first. Otherwise, you're going to blame your partner, you're going to blame the world. It starts with yourself first. What can help though is if you maybe plan ahead sometimes, if there's maybe a difficult chat that you need to have with your partner about finances, whatever, then of course you plan ahead and maybe, as a start to learn how to say those statements of fact. Also, people have different levels of risk, what Paul said, that is very true. So again, know yourself. If you know your own self in terms of risk, and you know your partners, can stomach risk or not, it also will help the discussion. You invited a friend over for the evening, or friends for that matter, but in this case, a friend. But now it's getting late. You would like to get ready for bed, but your friend seems unaware of how late it is. Right. How will you deal with this? Yeah, I actually enjoyed reading this. It is also true what Paul mentioned there, the so-called enneagram types. We will have a session on that soon as well. But he's saying, I would probably carry on chatting, I don't sleep. Shanine says, let's call it a day. I have an early start in the AM. Well, that's good if you can say that in the right way, assertively, not aggressively, but I actually like that. It all depends on a lot of areas as well. I understand that. Michelle is saying, my sister always asks, do you want coffee before you go? That's a nice way. I mean, in fact, what I do, if people start to care long, I will sort of say, who wants coffee? And in a way, it's safe to say. Jana is saying, normally asking if they want coffee gives them the idea that the evening is coming to an end. That is also actually what I do, Jana. And then Jolene is saying, I will tell them in a polite way that I have to go to bed, have to get up early. I will be honest in a polite way. Yeah, it's always good if you can be honest in a polite way. It's actually nicely put. Alta says, phone them and tell them to come another evening. I want to go to bed. But they're not there. They're not there, Alta.
Oh, I miss, yeah, I didn't read that.
No,
I didn't
sure.
listen.
Okay. And then Chris said, I just make a friendly comment that although I would like to, I have busy days scheduled and will catch up again at another time. also from Joanna, actually. That's true. It's just that some people, you know, if you sort of hint like they need to go, some of them, of course, can take it very personal. But then again, then they have their boundary issues, not necessarily yours, eh? Jackie is saying, can we take the conversation further at another time? I need to get up early in the morning. It's fine if you say it, you know, with the right way. It's always a how. It's how you say it, but I agree to that. Jana is saying that we have board up in our house. When you come in saying, welcome to our house, please leave at 9. I think that's maybe a comment there, Jana. Jackie, or maybe a follow-up visit. Yeah, one can do that as well. Chris would joke, let's go sleep. People want to leave. Works like a charm. Okay, Chris, maybe in your case. Paul, he said, Jana, you're a monster. Yeah. Zonita saying, geez, look at the time. Didn't realize it's late already. Amazing how time flies when you have good company. Okay. If you do it nicely. Would you like to sleep over? Well, maybe it depends on other friends. Maybe you don't want them to sleep over, eh? In terms of the boundary. But yes, for some people you might do that. Yeah. So the reason why this is important is just that you can, you know, it's just one of example. I mean, you must find your own examples in life. It's just one of the examples. What I would like to show you, and this is something that helped me to understand to be assertive, because we hear the word a lot, you know, you have to be assertive. And sometimes we mix it up by coming over too strongly, whatever, and the relationship, it's actually one of the questions that Michelle asked, you know, very, very early. I'm now getting to that. And I would love to share this with you, because it's something that really helped me in my own understanding. And take your time to look at this. If I can, there's the pictures of the passive, assertive, and aggressive. I suppose you understand that. But if you look at this on this vertical line, that is the concern with your own needs, and that is an attitude thing in yourself. You tend to be very concerned always, maybe, or a lot of the time with your own needs, right? And then on the horizontal level, it is the concern with other people's needs, high or low. So typical in terms of our profiles, some of us are very people-pleasing, I would say. Then I suppose that you tend to be very concerned a lot with other people's needs. And some of us, you know, the whole thing of the takers and givers, also in the chat room earlier, the takers and givers, some of us are more takers in life. Then your concern with your own needs are very high. So we need to learn the balance of taking and giving, especially in relationships. But the ideal is if you are high in your concern with your own needs in an assertive way, meaning factually, not like like aggressive, and you show empathy also for the other person's need. That brings us usually with win-win. That is when we get to win-win solutions. But if you're overly concerned with your own needs and less concerned with the other person's need, then it brings you in the lose quadrant. Because I mean, sorry, I didn't put it correctly. If you're like, people can walk over me. If you're not really concerned with your own needs and not also with other people's needs, it's in that quadrant, avoidance. People just start avoiding each other. It also depends on whether it's a relationship is. But the ideal is that you are high on needs for yourself and high on needs for the other person to bring in that quadrant. But as you know, in relationships, we need to compromise. It's not so easy as I've just put it. So in relationships, we learn how to compromise in the right way. It is that thingy of giving and taking, not just I'm a giver or I'm a taker. So that brings us in the compromise, which sometimes people little win-win and a little lose-lose. Sometimes they say negotiations when both parties feel a bit happy and a bit unhappy. Then usually that is a good outcome, especially if there was quite a disagreement on something. But if you are very high on your own needs and not concerned for other people's needs, you'll maybe experience it as a win, but it's actually a lose, because it will bite you later. And if you just don't draw your boundaries very clearly and you're so overly concerned about other needs, it's a lose-win. I mean, you lose anyway. It feels like a win, but it's actually also a loss. So this is something that you need to actually apply. So we don't have no time to sort of, maybe next time we can do it in small groups, but think of your life and think of situations where you didn't have this right, where you got it right. And the emotional win for a win-win, that is the big one to go for. But that is the place of self-respect. That is the place of giving rope to your partner. That is the place of all those things. And then another way, because if we say that we need to learn, how to get this right in our relationships, is also, to have there's a thing called positive intelligence, which is derived actually from emotional intelligence in a big way. But we have a wonderful brain. But this brain is very interesting how it's wired. You have a left brain and a right brain, and it's based on neuroscience. A bit of our small brain, the reptilian brain, they say, that is the part of our neurology where a lot of our feelings are there. So it's a bit our feeling brain in a big way as well. But it's also where we have these so-called dark emotions, or the feeling of rejections, or being over-rational. Everything that's too much of, that is where that type of, let's call it the fear emotions come from that side of the brain. And the other part of the brain, it's more the middle prefrontal cortex, and a little bit of the right side more as well. That part of the brain, that's the brain that developed over time. That is the part of the brain where you can be and feel and think creatively, and being inquisitive, and thinking, what is the big picture? What's really important? Is the small thing really important? What's the bigger picture? But it only works if you are in an empathy mode. And you can only be in an empathy mode when you are calm. So that is where we have to learn to pause. And that is the big thing to learn. It's not that difficult, but it's something that you have to learn. So in an argument, in relationships, especially money, if you feel that you don't agree and you maybe do not deal with it, so that you can be in an assertive way, because you can only be assertive if you are in an empathic mode. So the empathy is first for yourself, and then empathy for the other person, and then empathy for the reality. Then you can start thinking creatively. That is what we call having positive intelligence. But it's very brain science, so that's why I say our wonderful brain. And our motivations can be then either from fear-based, negative, or positive. So that is the difference. It's either fear-based motivation that you have, or a love-based motivation. If you have a relationship with when the two partners have both good boundaries, and you got it right to live in a win-win reality, or in a compromising positive reality, then it will be the positive emotions that will develop. So you have to develop this. It's development of what we call mental fitness. And maybe from this perspective, you have a choice. We sometimes think we do not have a choice, but you do have. That is my message from us for you tonight. You do have a choice. You do have a choice to decide, if you really want to look again at your boundaries and draw it. Can you imagine, if you get it right, that if something happens to you in a fight with money, for example, and you have to talk about it, and your partner is differ with you with an element of finance, and you can approach it with, what does this situation wants to tell you? That is what we say, that if you can learn over time a new perspective of what is the opportunity in this debate, what is the gift in this debate, what can you learn from this? then you know you got this right. Paul, you sent something, compatibility does not equal the same. Paul, maybe something you want to say about that?
Yeah, hi, thanks. Because I read some of these things, and you if you follow Till Swan's stuff, she has an interesting point there, because she's saying the whole idea of compromise is like creates a wrong impression, because usually one person ends up compromising more than the other, and eventually that ends in resentment. And you know, somebody eventually goes, "Oh, I can't. Why must I always compromise?" So she's saying we very often make a mistake, and that's what that link is, of saying that compatibility with somebody means thinking the same, but it actually doesn't. It doesn't mean you have to agree on everything all the time. It's more about how you handle the differences in terms of opinion. Like, I mean, I'm not able to quote you initially 100% just offhand.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's not a matter of, because she's saying in a compromise situation, it's either one person wins all the time, or both of you are sitting and the other one's unhappy, or you're both sitting with a less than great situation because you've now both compromised equally. So she's saying neither of those situations is a healthy relationship.
Absolutely, and thank you for that, and thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. We can just copy that. I saw the link there as well, because you know that is the test in a way. If you think where you are at the moment, if there's resentment, if you can't get agreement, because you know, especially when it comes to finance, if you're married or in a relationship where you share householding, you need to get agreement on things. Otherwise, your spouse will just walk over you, and then after 10-20 years you feel very much resentment.
My question is, I've grown up in a very strict house. It's kind of in a house where children are seen and not heard. So I think growing up in that way, you are you learn that your opinion isn't really important. And then when I started my own family, my husband was luckily, he taught me that I am allowed to have my own opinion. And it took me very long to get there. But in his household again, they kind of just rub problems underneath the carpet. Okay, so what happens in the end is we both tend to avoid conflict. So what happens is we don't fight, but we also don't talk about problems. So I've learned over the years that things like what is these martial arts where people they get comfortable with being in a fight when they do martial arts, or when they get into that actual fight, they're comfortable in that uncomfortable situation. How will you give your clients advice or someone advice to kind of get comfortable in getting into that conversation with your partner, and learning to talk to each other in about an uncomfortable subject? And how will you, my second question on that is how can we avoid doing that to our children?
Very, very important. I think a lot has to do with in NLP, we've learned a thing called the map is not the territory. What I mean by that is that if you think of the way that, let's say, you see the world, the way you see the world, your map of the world, your internal map of the world, how you see things, cannot be the same as your husband, for example, because he grew up in a different way of operating, a different, maybe even religion, a different way of dealing with finances, a different way of dealing with conflict. So it's two different maps. Okay, so he's got another map of the world. But we feel comfortable in our own maps. We feel comfortable because we all want to be so right. So it needs a bit of maturity to realize and to understand that, you know, my map is just my view of the world. So when we can help to learn people to respect each other's different maps of the world, and you can create a safe environment in a discussion. A safe environment doesn't, it's not heavy emotions involved, or being cross, or being, you know, it's being just feel safe to state your case without fighting, right? And then if both parties are willing to say, this is how I see things, this is how you see things, and it's in a calm environment, then both parties can say, you know, oh, now I see your point. And the other person will see, oh, I see your point. And then both creatively can say that, you know, how can we resolve this difference if there's a difference? But it's not a fighting thing. It could be compromise. It could be, you know, whatever. Or it could mean that you'll say that, you know, let's talk later about it. I first want to get my own facts right. But it's all about creating safety first. So if you're in an environment with your kids where the mom and the dad is now fighting about things, they cannot learn from that. But if you can teach your kids to say it's okay to fight, you know, it's okay, but not, you know, punch, okay? It's okay. Make conflict your friend, because in conflict, if you can get it right to say the conflict is actually there to show you a better way and not your way, then we learn to listen to each other. Not to respond, but to understand. And so it has a lot to do with listening skills, and something you can teach people. You can teach your kids listening skills.
So I just thought perhaps, I mean, something that I learned was in discussions with Alta, I'm not sure you probably have the same, is that that how much one's personality affects perhaps some of those reactions you have to, let's say, risk or money spending. So if you're a certain type of personality, you might be, by very nature of your personality, opposing something that your partner might be proposing. And it's really not that there's anything wrong with the idea, but it's more of your personality that you would need to identify that that's who you are and that's why you're making that decision, so that you maybe not evaluating the real decision, but you are falling back into a personality behavior. And, you know, to be sure that you're not doing that. I mean, if I take my dad as an example, we grew up where basically credit was a terrible thing. You didn't owe money of any kind. And many years later, I sort of thought back and I thought if my dad could see that I had property value, a debt of 12 million rand, he would have done a backflip and died of a heart attack.
Yeah.
Without considering the fact that how much of value that was worth, about 15 in terms of real terms at the time, and that type of thing.
What I want to just say is sometimes we're fighting for the same thing. And what you need to ask yourself is, what is our vision? What is our vision for this, you know, on this topic? Because you think your opinion is right and he thinks his opinion is right. It's just the different maps, as Willie is saying. But if you can make decisions and say, this is my opinion, I think a lot of the time, and I say it to a lot of people, is fight for a cause, don't fight with each other. So, and what I mean by that is, if it's, listen, to teach my kids a different way, is go and read, share it, instead of only putting your opinions, because if we really look at opinions and perception, there's 9 billion, because we've 9 billion people on this planet. But you want to do the best, and what is your vision for your kids? Then you can map it out clearly. But the moment, you know, you go into arguments, you think it's I'm right and you're wrong. And it's not about right or wrong. Nobody's right and nobody's wrong. It's about what is your vision now, you're going to get to that. And you just got different perceptions of how to get to that vision. What I want to just say, one last thing, Willie, is I've seen couples that had no conflict whatsoever for 15 years. And the moment they started disagreeing, within I think 1 year, they actually divorced. And it's because the one person was always the people's pleaser, just loud, but the resentment is building up and building up and building up. And when, you know, when the resentment is building up, somewhere along the line, and you don't state your opinions, you're gonna somewhere explode or just walk away. And that is what happens if there's no healthy conflict. And if I say healthy conflict, is we can agree to disagree. It's your opinion, it's my opinion, and we stop it here. What do we want to achieve for the kids? And if you're not sure, you know, I always say to people, you know, if you're feeling that you're clashing all the time, get a different opinion. If you want to see a different perspective, get somebody else. to give both of you a different perspective on it, it can mean the world to you, because we see things different.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Alta. Also, coming back to Paul's point of knowing yourself, and that is why I think the enneagram is such a great tool. If you know yourself, if you know your own type, if you know your personality profile, and you know your partner's personality profile, it just makes things very easy. For example, maybe not everybody are familiar with the enneagram, but there's the so-called numbers from 1 to 9. But typical, the so-called number 8, 9, and 1, they are people that wants to correct things, especially how we grew up. For Jana, in your example, if that was your parents' situation, it might mean that when you were a baby, that you have to learn that, you know, what is now right and wrong. And you sometimes see that for me to survive and to cope, my coping mechanism is to correct things in life. Right, so that could be your coping mechanism, and then there's a specific pattern of behavior. For another child, the child's coping mechanism could be that I need to connect with people. As long as I connect with people, you know, I'll be okay. And for another type, could be is that I need to protect at all costs. I need to protect my things. So basically, all of us, in a way, can be divided between connect, correct, and protect. And some of these patterns of behavior is just very stronger with one personality and less with another personality. So once you know your type, it just makes it so much easier. So that is also part of my answer. Basically, what we do, Alta is focusing on the enneagram, very much so. That's a passion. My focus is very much positive intelligence in terms of that, but we work together. And we discussed, Alta, correct me if I'm wrong, we said that, you know, for this group, whatever courses we have for this group, we will have a 50% discount on the cost of that. It's a program, it's a couple of weeks program, very intensively. It's really the focus is know yourself and develop yourself to become mentally fit. And you can approach us for that. But thank you, Alta, and please, I invite you to make comments in the chat box. It helps actually if you've got one thing that you've learned from tonight, you know, intentionally just say it in the chat box, because it's for you. It's not for us. It's for you, because it helps you. Because the moment you put your brain into intention mode, I know Paul also understands this. We also had, Paul is very fluent in the NLP stuff. You know, when you put your intention in things, you're actually going to do it. So maybe just put your intention there for yourself. Then you know it's there, you've put it there, you put it out there, and you're going to do it. Take the one thing that you've learned tonight and just share it in the group. I really appreciate that. Whilst you do that, also, Michelle, from my side, thank you for assisting us with all these seminars. We're going to learn from everyone and do it better and better and better. And yeah, I think that is then all from my side. Somebody just joined now. Can you leave it at the end? But it doesn't matter. It is recorded, so we will actually have the recording session for you as well. If you can just go quickly to the chat here, people are thanking us for this. Thank you for that as well. And it's now 9 o'clock, so I need to say goodbye. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you very much, Willie. Thank you, Alta. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We appreciate your time and patience. And yeah, it was a lovely discussion. I really do appreciate it. And I actually learned a lot. Thank you, Willie. Alta, you guys are amazing. Thanks.
Thank you. It's a couple of people still wants to hang on. It's fine. We can be here available for another 10 minutes or so. But in the meantime, if you want to leave the group, it's okay. But if anybody wants to ask a question about anything, feel free to ask. We're here. Okay.
What's up, Paul? You were saying?
Yeah, no, it's just some years ago, I mean, check the time flying, we had that discussion there at the Reba. One of the biggest impacts on me was that concept that I try to raise now, Alta, where I never really noticed the correlation between what you call relationship with money and how the whole personality thing and your spending and all of that relates. For some reason, it never crossed my mind until you told us about it. So I was thinking it's probably, maybe you don't, obviously it's not necessarily for this particular discussion, but I think it's something that people, I mean, if you look at the impact on me, I think it's something worth looking at, because you see things from a different perspective, and you see things totally almost like, you know, okay, now I know why I have an objection to that, because my personality is opposing that particular, let's say, spend, or that particular risk, or that, and it makes much more sense to you why you feel like you would about the decision.
Yeah, Paul, so it's so valuable, because as you get to know yourself on a much deeper level, and you understand what's the blocks holding on to you, and what's blocking you from actually financial success, because it's the emotions. If you change your relationship with money, you also change your relationship with self, and that's actually to value yourself, high self-esteem, high self-value. It's very, very related, because the moment you change your relationship with self, you also change your relationship with money. It does not come from your fear-based thoughts anymore. It comes from that assertiveness, and it's also that the confidence actually that comes with it. Willie, I don't know, but it's the confidence.
You know, and when you start like your business starts hitting a bump, and experiencing this, you start questioning your value as a whole, because you kind of go, having done everything I've done, why am I not able to make a success of it, for example, compared to somebody who's had less advantages? So all that crap kind of runs through, well, a tough personality like me, and it becomes a judgmental thing where you kind of saying, well, yeah, you're a failure, you didn't succeed, you're sitting with this problem because it must be you, because other people aren't in the same boat. So you start knocking your own self-worth and thinking, well, how am I going to get out of this mess? So it's a knock-on. Exactly.
It's the survival. Yeah, it's the survival that's coming in. And at that stage, what you actually need to do is you need to tell your brain a different story. And that's the crucial part is, remember, I listened last week to also to a coach, and he said, for the first 7 years, it's like your subconscious mind is just sucking up everything. And you've got no control over it. And it's just your subconscious mind sucking up everything. So if you want to change it, I mean, we're doing it at a much older age, if you want to change this vessel, because your subconscious is your reality. If you want to change your reality, you have to change your personality. And the only way you can change your personality is by retraining your subconscious mind. And I've seen people created miracles, and it's all about it's the fear, the judgment, that's holding you back. And I mean, you have to grow, you have to feel uncomfortable, because if you don't feel uncomfortable, you'll never grow.
No, that's very important, and the self-belief, or that self-narrative. If, for example, if you have that inner voice, I'm not good enough, I'm not good to the relationships. In a way, the moment your brain believes something, you will go out of your way to prove that your belief is correct. So, for example, let's assume that you say for yourself, I'm not good with relationships. Gee whiz, now you start believing that. And subconsciously, you will act as, you will actually jeopardize the relationship, because that's what you believe. It's not logic, Paul, but it seems to me that is how our human beings are. So that means that over time we have to learn what is our internal narrative. What are the things we're saying to ourselves. So if we say to ourselves that, yes, maybe I made some mistakes with relationships, but of course, I've got the equipment, I've got support, I can learn things, I can be good with relationships, and you start believing I am good with relationships, you will actually start proving that to yourself. And I'm an example of that. I mean, if I look at my failed relationships in more than one marriage, I mean, I can so clearly now see the pattern of behavior. I can so clearly see it, and I say, damn it, I wished I had this knowledge when I was 20, when I had my first marriage at 21. I was just a kid, So now it's very important, but things can be learned and things can be unlearned. And it's like driving a bicycle. The first time you feel unwobbly, then after a while it's easy. Important, but also actually just said, Alta, that's quite important, is the fact that if you want to change something in your thinking pattern or your behavioral pattern, it will feel uncomfortable in the beginning. It will. And if it's not feeling uncomfortable, you're not learning a new thing. So you need to say, fantastic, it feels uncomfortable, but you just have to go through that. It's not months.
So one thing that I've learned from Alta, I was doing a presentation at the International Women Business Conference. And one thing that I took from Alta's advice, she said that your relationship with money is a true reflection of the beliefs about yourself.
Okay.
So I took that very deep, and I looked at myself and I looked at my family, and I can tell you right now, I mean, this thing's happening even practical because my grandfather just passed away, and I'm seeing the relationship with money with my family in terms of what they expect from us, in terms of contributions, and you know, the so-called black tax. So now I see that everything that they've learned over the years about money isn't really a true reflection of what money is really about. Money is really about exchange of energy. And I can actually feel that with my family right now during this difficult time, because there's a whole lot of different energy that has been exchanged. It's negative, others it's also positive. But money is a big thing in our life, and what we believe about it is actually a true reflection of the belief in ourselves, whether we are truly worth it, or we are feeling worthy of it, or if our kids are worthy of it, or they're worthy of the knowledge of it. But I really, really appreciate these lessons and these sessions, because I'm really, really learning a lot, especially with the situation that I'm in my family, because I can see that money plays a big role in our relationship as a family. I understand why other family members tend to be so negative in terms of the relationship that we have. And it all has to do with the relationship with money, because money influences our relationship as people. It influences the energy that we give towards each other as people as well, because money is actually an exchange of energy. It either can be negative, sometimes it can be positive.
So nicely put, Yanda and Alta. I'm so glad that you have that the good things you teach people, Alta, sometimes come out like that.
Ayanda will tell you, I believed in him when he did not believe in himself. And
that's so nice to hear.
I got him in ABSA. He was one of the 2 people in ABSA that I got without a degree, and I snatched him, and he's very successful. He's actually a financial advisor in Nedbank Private Bank.
Fantastic. That's great. You know, Yanda, sometimes these workshops that we do, sometimes we speak to 30, 40, even 100 people. I mean, I also did conferences with 100 people. But sometimes I say to myself, if there's only one person that I could have touched with something, then also it's for me worthwhile as a coach, you know. But really, thank you. It's so nice the way you summed it up. Michelle, your hand is up.
Thank you, Willie. Willie, I wanted to touch on the point where you had that little graph with the X and Y axis, with the win-win, lose-lose, and so forth. There's this guy on the internet, I'm not sure what his name is. He's also a public speaker, and his focus and niche is on negotiations. And he kept saying, the other day I saw that, he kept saying that no one should lose from a negotiation. How do you tie this back to your graph to say that we have a little win and a little lose, both of us?
Yeah, that is correct in terms of the departure point of win-win. So it's the need of the individual and the need of the other person. But in real life, you know, if one can compare our maps in such a way that both people are really changing their maps about the decision they need to take, and they willingly say, okay, yes, let's do this. That's the compromise. That is actually win-win. But in real life, it's not always possible, and then we have to compromise, because it's impossible to understand your partner 100%.
Yes.
Yeah.
I got it. Thank you, Willie.
But you know, in life, you know, if we can get it right, what I said earlier about safety, if you are in a part with a partner and you know it's not safe, you should say it. You should say, I don't feel safe. I don't think I can talk to you now. Let's talk tomorrow. But the moment emotions is high, if the stakes are high and the emotions is high, you can just as well not have the discussion. So you have to, to get the emotions down and talk, rational, But then, of course, the whole thing of trust, also trust, if you don't trust, so you have to build
and
trust.
taking offense with what someone's saying, that is
people will.
Yeah.
But a lot has to do with trust. So if you don't trust, then you say, but you have to then develop trust, but you earn trust. Alta?
Now I want to, I listened to Michelle where she say, when you take offense, what I think is very important is that the more you get to know yourself, doesn't matter what other people say about you, you won't take it on because you know yourself. So the more you get to know yourself on a very deep level, people can accuse you, people can say whatever about you. They can even say things that they want to hurt you. And you know what? It's like, really, it's like water from a duck. I know it sounds very strange that you'll never be able to do it. Some people think it's impossible, but I'm telling you, it's possible.
It's definitely possible. I agree with that. It works. I've done it.
Yeah, because you know who you are, you know your self-worth. And if people are saying things, it doesn't touch you. We, as people that went through a lot of trauma and that's got a lot of hurt, they're very, very sensitive, actually. So for them, very sensitive people, sometimes got a lot of trauma and they take everything personally. And that's what we need to help them actually not to take things personally, what other people are saying, is get your self-worth, your self-esteem and your self-confidence and your own self-belief very strong. Because if you get that strong, what other people say about you won't affect you that much.
Interesting thing on that. It works both ways, good and bad. That's the interesting part to make it work, I found. So it goes for praise as well. You go, yes, thanks, that's very nice, but it shouldn't affect you because you either know internally whether you did well or didn't, and you've already made your own judgment as to your whatever it is you did. So then somebody else's opinion is really, by the way, whether it's good or bad is really, it's not like, oh, I'm going to only listen to the praise. It's, well, yeah, okay, so great, you thought it was good, I'm very glad for you, but it doesn't really affect you as a person because you've already evaluated your own performance.
Yeah.
I learned that in the PQ course. So, Willie, yes, you did get through to me. I got that one. Where's the little truth in what someone is saying? I need to be curious about the little truth that they are saying. So if I can improve, I will. But if I can't, that's no problem. And also, if it happens, it's not good or bad, it happened. Or if it doesn't happen, it's not good or bad, it didn't happen. Plain simple, as Paul said just now. It shouldn't, the praise and critique or whatever else, it shouldn't affect us.
No, very true. Very valid.
Yeah, so Paul, you'll enjoy the PQ thing. Did you do that?
No, not yet.
Do
it's
it.
something
It's
you can look at.
interesting.
It's a 7-week intensive course. It's a weekly videos on your app, on your cell phone, and it's also group sessions, like 45 minutes per week after hours, and maybe a few direct sessions with us. But it's really intensive, the PQ course, positive intelligence. That's what the PQ stands for. It's really something you can look at. And well, if you want to do it, I mean, we said it, Alta, whatever people want to do, it's half price. So anyways, it's off the scut. So
you go, guys.
Great for that, yeah.
Yes, and I did get uncomfortable, so that means that I did learn something, right, Willie?
Yeah,
I was very uncomfortable.
No, you that is correct. You learned. We have another Ayanda here. So Ayanda and Michelle, they both learned a couple of good things.
And we'll communicate the next session, for next month.
100%. And we give the link to people. And I'm glad, Tracy, I'm glad to see you again after about 3 years or so. We did a mediation course together. And we have lots of things we can actually share. But I haven't met Cole. Lon is still with us. I haven't met Cole, but yeah, also thanks for joining everybody. And Have a great evening. Great. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Willie.
Thank
Bye.
you,
Thank
guys.
Michelle.
Bye well.